Good morning. Welcome to my channel. This is Doc AndrewLuis. Today, I'm gonna lecture on how to do a research. This is intended for senior high school and college students. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to my channel by clicking the right bottom of your desktop screen. Moving on, let us start. Let us define first what is a research. It is a scientific method of inquiry for the purpose of obtaining facts in response to problems. It is a systematic method of knowing scientific knowledge. So research is scientific, that it requires you to collect data and information in order to understand the problems you want to investigate. Let us discuss the steps of the scientific method in order to understand more a scientific research. Number one, identify the problem. So, what problem you think is worthy to be investigated? Number two, observe and gather data. So, you must collect information regarding the problem to be investigated. Number three, process the data. So, after you collect the data, you must compute the data using statistical tools, if possible, in order to measure the variables that you want to investigate in your research. Further, I will tell you what are the research variables. Number four, analyze and interpret the data. So after you have collected the data and measure and compute them using statistical tools, you have to analyze it now and interpret the data. Later on, I will discuss how to do it. Number five, draw conclusions and recommendations. The importance of research is that you have to have recommendations that will be useful in your community, in your workplace, and for future researchers. Let me discuss what are the characteristics of scientific method. Number one, it is systematic. It means it follows a very organized and logical manner. That's why there are step by step to do it. I will tell you later on. Number two, it is accurate. Because you gather data, you observe facts. It is factual and accurate. Number three, it is precise. Because after you collect your data, you have to measure your variables and process them, compute them using statistics, so it is precise. And number four, it is empirical. It means that because you have collected your data, you have processed your data using statistics, you have provided evidence. You have tested your data against empirical evidence. So it is empirical. Now, what are the characteristics of scientific research? Number one, it is falsifiable. Every hypothesis in research can be falsified when you test it. If it is not falsified, it is not researchable. Number two, it is significant. It means it is relevant. It is useful to the community and to your workplace. For example, number three, it is replicable. It means you can use again the research topic and problems and method of another researcher using, of course, new information or data. So if you can replicate a study of others, it is researchable. Number four, it is value neutral. It means when you do research, you don't predict what will happen. You don't have a judgment, a value judgment. You're asking a question. You're asking a research problem. You don't know if it is true or not. So your thesis statement and problems and questions should be stated in a value neutral form. For example, this is a thesis of college students at University of Makati College of Nursing. Here, the title is Intensity of Psychosocial Stress and Physiological Symptom of Nursing Students of University of Makati, a proposed stress management program. So this will be my example throughout this lesson. So you see, this is a value neutral statement. It only say intensity of psychosocial stress and physiological symptom. It did not say anything if it is good or bad, because the study will be able to investigate this later on after the researchers have gathered, collected, and processed their data. And in the conclusions is where you will now put whatever judgment or findings you have reached in your research. Okay? Moving on, is generalizable. So, meaning, your findings can be generalized. Your conclusions and findings can be generalized or applied as a general knowledge. Okay? Number 7, it is dialectical. Dialectical means your research can be an induction or a deduction. An induction means you are investigating a problem from specific, drawing into general conclusions, or the other way around. You are using a general theory, and after investigation, you're applying it into specific problems or details. So that is the meaning of dialectical. Next, what are the qualities of a researcher that you must possess when doing a research? First of all, honesty. That is why when you use other books, references, especially internet articles in the website, you have to acknowledge your sources as in the bibliography section or as a footnote. Intellectual dishonesty is a mortal sin in doing research. And we have intellectual property rights law that prohibits to publish books or articles and copy and paste in as your own research. So that is not allowed. You will get a failing grade or incomplete grade if you do that. So honesty is very important. That's why it's number 1. Number 2, skepticism. As a researcher, you must be skeptic. Not all you read and research in the internet or in the library is to be believed. You have to convince yourself that it is true or it is reasonable or logical to read and quote or paraphrase in your thesis or research in the chapter 2 in your review of related literature. Later on, I will show you the example. Number 3, openness. You must be open to new information and facts. You must not be censoring information as a researcher. A researcher is like a journalist. What he sees, what he hears, he is just observing and reporting it as it develops. Okay? Number 4, creativity. As a researcher, you must be creative not only in your writing, but also in organizing the framework of your research. So it must follow a logical connection between the parts of the thesis and your research variables. Number 5, resourcefulness. This is very important as a researcher. You know where to find your sources of information. You know where to gather and collect your facts. For example, if you're doing a survey research, you know who are your respondents, where to get them, and how to proceed with your survey or your interview with your respondents. Number 6, logical reasoning, of course. Because our research is a scientific inquiry, you must be all times reasonable. Think reasonable and logical. And finally, patience. As a researcher, of course, when you start your research, you have to read and read and read. You have to go through, take down notes. You have to also consult your thesis advisor, your teacher or your professor. And of course, when you write your draft, it is not final. Your advisor will revise them. Then when you present it before your research panel, it will be revised. It will be edited. So I tell my students, one half of the research is being cooked by the researcher. One half of the research is cooked by the advisor. And when you defend it before a panel of experts or your research panel, it will be again cooked by your panelists. So there must be patience. So the final research output is a product of the researcher, the previous researchers or the authors of your sources of information, your thesis advisor, and your research panel. So it is a collective product of these stakeholders. And there must be patience. Without patience, you cannot finish your research because you are not open to criticism. You're not open to change. You're not open to advice. As a student, you have to go through this nitty-gritty process of critical revision of your research paper. Did you understand that? Thank you. Moving on. Let me discuss the general approaches to research. There are two kinds, the qualitative research and the quantitative research. So what is qualitative research? From the word quality, it is an inquiry process of understanding social or human problem based on building a complex, holistic picture formed with words reporting detailed views of informants and conducted in a natural setting. Usually, it is done in inductive, from specific details to general details, according to Creswell. So you see, I am quoting my sources, Creswell. So usually, a qualitative research is understanding a problem by getting facts from people and subjects, and their responses are written in open-ended answers or responses in narrative forms. Qualitative research is not recommended for beginning researchers. So as beginners, I do not recommend you to do qualitative research. In college, you can do this if you're already knowledgeable on how to do a quantitative research. Okay. Number two, quantitative research, from the word quantity, meaning you're measuring quantities, like, for example, weights, liters, gallons, or you're measuring distance, like meters, feet, inches. A quantitative research is an inquiry into a social or human problem based on testing a theory composed of variables measured with numbers and analyzed with statistical procedures in order to determine whether the predictive generalizations of the theory hold true, by Creswell. So usually it is deductive. So from general information to specific details. So for example, you're starting a theory, a framework, a theoretical framework that I will show you later. And then you have to test or apply that theory into a specific setting, a specific respondents, a specific problems. I will show you later. This is just a background of the approaches to research. Moving on. So this is a framework of the comparative approaches to research. So these are the qualitative on the left side. It's inductive, it's exploratory, it's towards building, developing theory, or forming new knowledge. While quantitative on the right screen is deductive method. It's about cause and effect relationship towards enriching a theory or falsifying a theory. So I told you, a qualitative research is if you want to interview subjects who can help you understand a problem and try to solve the problem. So this is done in narrative form. Usually these are exploratory, meaning these are new knowledge and new information, and you want to develop a new knowledge or a new theory. While quantitative research method, it is deductive. You have already have a theory. Now you will apply it. Usually it has variables, an independent and a dependent variable. For example, factors affecting COVID-19 pandemic, because this is relevant today. So, for example, what are these factors? Not wearing a mask, not washing your hands with soap for at least 20 seconds. So, there is a cause and effect relationship. And this is already enriching a theory or falsifying a theory. You have already have a theory, you're just applying it and testing your theory, your existing theory. Moving on. So this is a popular method in research survey that I recommend beginners of research to use a survey questionnaire. It is a very popular approach because it conducts the study prior to the event or retrospective. During the event, developmental, and after the event, prospective. Okay. So you can do a pre-survey. For example, who will you vote these coming elections? That is a pre-survey. Or there's also a who did you vote? After the elections, you will make an exit survey. So you know who won already. Even before the Commission on Elections will declare who's the winner. So what is an exit poll? An exit survey. After the voters went out and voted their candidates, you will survey them. Who did you vote as president, as vice president, as senators or congressmen, as mayors or vice mayors? So that is a exit survey after the event or prospective. Next, the subjects of the study are not manipulated to experimental and control groups. So a survey is an informal way to gather information from respondents or individuals. It is not very formal or sophisticated like you are in a control lab. You're experimenting an anti-viral vaccine that you need an experimental. Those you did not give the medicine or the vaccine, and the control group, those you have given the medicine or vaccine. And you will see if the results of both groups will have an effect or not. So a survey is not like that. Then it has no random assignment of subjects to conditions. So the targets of the survey are called respondents. So there are many different kinds of sampling methods. Random sampling method, simple random sampling method, snowball sampling, clustered sampling method, stratified sampling method. Usually in your statistical research, statistics subject, these are taught. So this is not the proper venue to talk about the different sampling techniques because it is very long. Okay? So I'm here only to help you how to do and write your research. Next, it has the strengths of reconstruction of retrospective events and the prediction of prospective events. of incorporation of unlimited variables, of inclusion of many respondents to improve capacity to generalize a larger population, and of examination of unlimited variables in both descriptive and explanatory designs. Okay. It's nosebleed. Don't be nosebleed, okay? So, in simple terms, this means that in a survey method, you use the variables, your independent and dependent variables. So you have already your independent variables. In order to know and your dependent variables, you have to gather the information or facts of your dependent variables from your independent variables. Because you have to know the causes and the effects. Later on, I will try to explain it using our example, an actual thesis. Okay? Finally here, the basic requirements in the conduct of a survey are identification of groups to be studied, determination of the number of sample respondents, and the determination of the timing of observation. So this is about the method of your sample respondents and how to go about your survey. Where you go? Where do you go? Who? The place, the time, and the individuals. Okay? I will show you later in the actual thesis what should be included in chapter 3 under your methodology and using a survey method. Next. So these are the characteristics of quantitative versus qualitative. You see, the purpose of study of a quantitative research is to describe and explain events using numerical data to ultimately be able to control and predict. So it uses numbers. It's measurable. The variables are measurable. Under qualitative, to detail the processes applied and draw patterns and insights. So it is sometimes it's hard to measure because it does not use numbers, so you have to use qualities like honesty, patience. Those are data that cannot be assigned with numbers and measure, okay? Role of the respondents. Under quantitative, views of respondents are aggregated into statistical data. So here, we use statistics to gather and process data, while in qualitative is to identify individuals, groups whose ideas are important. So these are narrative forms, interviews. What is the role of the researcher? Under quantitative, it manipulates conditions for experimental and quasi-experiments, while qualitative observes events in the empirical setting as in surveys. So even both have questionnaire. Under quantitative, the researcher will gather information using sample respondents, while under qualitative, the researcher will gather interviews from specific subjects who have knowledge on the subject matter. Moving on. So we're almost halfway. So we will have our break. Okay. Half, like a half in basketball, half time.